Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have John Ralston with us. He is CEO at the Nevada Independent. Today's going to be a fun one with John, and this pod is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcasts like this one, build your community, subscribers, and even get clients. John, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and TNI?
Well, thanks for having me, Charles. I really appreciate it. I have been in Nevada for close to 40 years now, a little under 40 years. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. Never thought I'd end up out here. I went to journalism school, thought I'd be in a career path back to the New York Times, which was the gold standard, the iconic. It's what my dad read every day. But I came out here in an entry-level job covering night police, and clawed my way up the totem pole, became a political reporter, then a political columnist. Then I started dabbling in TV, had my own TV show, different iterations of it for about 15 and a half years. And then in 2017, I launched the Nevada Independent as a transparent, balanced, deeply reported site with 5 or 6 other people. And we're now at, I think, our 26th employee, 6.5 years plus in.
While most media companies are shutting down, so what's your secret?
I don't sleep. I have found that originally, because I had had such a long history in the state, I was able to get the fundraising base going because of my relationships. But now it's less about me, which I'm glad, and about the incredibly talented young reporters that I've had. And I think this nonprofit model, while very, very difficult, and we almost didn't make it through COVID, is the model for journalism going forward. I just don't think, unless you're owned by a billionaire who can afford to hemorrhage money, that it's going to work.
Is independent synonym with unbiased?
Hope so. We are independent. We're very transparent of who our donors are. We disclose every donor on the site, from a person who gave us $5 to a person who gave us 7 figures. And so people know where we're coming from. And if they want to question a story because of who donates, I'm happy to interact with them, as are my editors. So yeah, we are as independent. Now, obviously, in this highly polarized environment in this country, people are not necessarily going to believe that, and they're going to use their own confirmation bias to say, aha, I knew he was starting this leftist newspaper or whatever. And some will say the other way, as a matter of fact. But I just have such pride in my reporters who really work hard to be fair every day.
So if I donate you 1 million, and plus I tend to have good persuasion skills, I'd invite you to like my masterminds and we'd become friends. And do you think I could have an influence on your articles?
Why don't you give me $1 million and then we'll find out. The answer
When's
is no.
the due date?
Yeah, the answer is no. Listen, I understand the perception. We did have one donor who has given us $1 million, who now has decided not to give us any more money. In fact, he's Welsh on a commitment to give us 6 figures this year because he got mad about something. I don't know what it is. It's going to happen. The 3 original donors that I started the Indie with are now essentially giving us nothing. And that's why you have to build up recurring monthly donors, small donors, in addition to getting the big donors and foundation grants and other. You have to have a diversified revenue stream. You get that.
So what happened to big media? Were these folks quote unquote corruptible, or just like more money oriented?
Are you saying like big newspapers and big TV stations? What happened to them?
Fox News and so forth.
Well, Fox News is an anomaly, in my opinion, but I don't think they're corrupt. But they are businesses, right? And they have to meet a bottom line. And so they may make decisions that end up being way too influenced by that. But I dealt with a lot of people at major legacy media outlets and in cable news. I've been a contributor to MSNBC occasionally, and these are top flight journalists who try to do a fair and balanced reporting job, as Fox would put it.
So let's say that I want to start my media company and report accurately. I put my values out there: honesty, growth, adding net value to my community. How do I scale that and get quite rich in the process?
Well, I haven't figured that part of it out since we're a nonprofit, and I get a good salary, but I haven't gotten rich. In fact, I've essentially taken a pay cut from what I was making before I started the indie. But I'm not in this to get rich. Neither are any of the people working for me, although we pay very, very well. We pay above the market in Nevada and in most other places, and our reporters have great benefits, and they earn them. They work long hours. It's not a 9 to 5 job, journalism. And listen, my first job at the Las Vegas Review-Journal was as a night police reporter, and I made $17,500 a year, which in 1984 I thought was okay. But it's still not a business you get into to get rich. There are journalists who have gotten rich, but they've generally done it, not always, because they're very, very good at what they do.
Right, which is the best case when you put out a product that people enjoy. And that's actually my next question. I've read various books by quote unquote journalists, and some of them, yes, were biased and even tried to ruin the reputation of some folks. For example, Billion Dollar Loser, which was Adam Newman's kind of hit piece, if you want. John Carreyrou with Bad Blood was John in Wall Street Journal, I feel, at one point. They're still really good books. They're well written. The information is good. Just that I feel that these books are at the expense of these individuals, right? They're quite win-lose. Now, the counter argument to that is how many lives did these individuals negatively affected? So first, what's your opinion on that? And then how do you actually write masterpiece investigative journalism pieces?
Well, I haven't read Carreyrou's book, but it got a lot of good reviews, and he was given credit for essentially bringing down Theranos, and in that book, as I said, I have not read it, but he's a very well-respected journalist. But there certainly are books that have been written that the author has set out, and you call it a hit piece, which is the term of art for these kinds of things. Listen, I've just finished writing a biography of a very controversial figure, a guy named Harry Reid, who was a longtime senator and Senate Majority Leader, and was very controversial, and a lot of people did not like him. And it's going to be, the book's not nearly ready for publication, but when it comes out, I'm sure some people will see it as a hit piece. Some people will see it as being too easy on him. Why didn't you expose the fact that he was a serial killer? These kinds of things. I'm being facetious to make the point. And so, the real problem with these kinds of things is people, as I said, I call it the validation culture. They come at things from a certain perspective, and they're unwilling to have contrary views penetrate that perspective and think outside of their own bubble. That's a real problem.
So Senator Harry Reid, did he hire you for that, or was that an independent project of your own?
He cooperated with the biography, but he did not hire me to do it. He agreed to do it after I'd been asking him for years and years and years. He and I had a very rocky up and down relationship, and he finally was advised that I was the only one who could do the book right, because I covered him for 35 years. But he said up front, I don't want any of the money. This is your book. You do with it what you want. I know I'm not going to like everything in it, but do the book right.
Okay. Did you ever study Conrad Black?
I know who Conrad Black is. I wouldn't say I studied him. Why do you ask?
Because, yeah, I did study him a little bit, and it seems somewhat obvious that the guy wrote good pieces to get presidential pardon by Trump. And point of this podcast, not to get into controversy, but is that like an example of like a line that you can't overstep?
Well, of course, and you know that kind of thing does happen, right? And in some cases, it's pretty transparent what's going on, right? And so you know, I could never do anything like that. I don't understand how people look themselves in the mirror in the morning and can do stuff like that. Doesn't mean I haven't made mistakes, but certainly nothing of that magnitude.
We've also seen, do you know Palmer Luckey, the founder of Anduril, ex Oculus guy, the guy that created Oculus?
Since my 11-year-old stepdaughter was obsessed with the Oculus for a while, I'm familiar with Oculus, but not familiar with him.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool device. He's a quite an eccentric guy. I love him for that, but he studied journalism. So initially he said to be a journalist. There's other founders that had similar backgrounds that will come up to my mind, but he's been fired off Facebook because of a these highway signs. There's a lot of them in Vegas, by the way, which is related to another question of mine. But he put one like against, I think, Hillary back in the days. He was Trumpist. And for that reason, he got fired off Facebook. And since then, he's been on a tirade against other journalists. His new company is really successful. It's called Anduril. It's a hardware military company. And he just loves bitching about journalism, basically. And I would mostly agree with him. A lot of journalisms nowadays, journalists, they don't make the background research, and all they go for is the headline, right? And I think a lot of these media companies, they reward with bonuses, just like a UFC fighter that would win knockout of the night. Well, the knockout in their realm is like the best headline, the most clicks, and so forth. How can we fix that?
Well, unfortunately, what you're saying is true of some outlets, and it's too bad. I think that there's a lot of people at these outlets that you're referring to who are caught up in wanting, they have to keep their jobs. And so they make compromises that they shouldn't. They go for clicks. They're willing to listen to the boss when he says, go do this story that shouldn't be done, that is an obvious hit piece or slant hit. That kind of thing happens. It happens, I would guess, in every major market in America, and many smaller ones. It's probably even a bigger problem because in the rural communities, even though there's a problem with newspapers drying up there, everyone knows everyone, right? And so it's difficult to get what the straight story is. But how do you stop that? I think not enough people in my business draw a line when they are hired, and they say, I will go up to this line, but I will not go over it. And where you draw that line is really important.
Right. I think that's the main point here. Like, you drew this line, and you're not doing this fully for capitalistic reason. You're doing that to provide good information to the Nevada citizens and a different opinion, which is cool. And that's really useful in this current political race. Having different voices to the table and exchanging opinions, because nowadays the debating model is you lose, I win, or you win, I lose. And that is not productive for democracy, I believe, and to elect the right leaders, responsible and ethical leaders. Because there's also this story that you've probably heard about Gawker and making hit piece on Peter Thiel, and then Peter Thiel funding Hulk Hogan's lawsuit and bringing Gawker down. That was like very impressive, but also very Machiavellian. I don't think we ever need to get to there, but when someone, I believe his name was Nick Denton, goes that far to denigrate someone, I mean, that's not cool. Leave the man in peace. I mean, if he's gay or whatever is his belief, I think if I would have a journalist like that on my back, that would make my life miserable, that would attack my wife, my family. I mean, that's not cool, and that's where I think people need to draw a line.
Yeah, I think the general perception, excuse me, of course I followed that case, but the general perception there is that Gawker went too far but that the reaction by Peter Thiel was like disproportionate, that he decided, after a slingshot to come at them with a bazooka. And so I listen, there are a lot of rich people in this country who do not like their privacy invaded, or do not like to be portrayed in anything but the most flattering terms. And it is very dangerous and scary for journalists to go out, and I wouldn't use the term go after them, but portray them in the light that they think is the truth. There have been really good, books written about people like Elon Musk, who is another great example. Ashley Vance, I think, is the name of the author of that book, and that was a good book. And I came away from that book a long time ago now, thinking, pros and cons. I didn't have an overwhelmingly negative view of Musk. It's changed, so I think it was difficult with my book on Harry Reid, the same kind of thing, because a lot of people hated Harry Reid and a lot of people loved Harry Reid. And of course, there's no human being who is black and white either way, right? There are some kind of nuance, and to try to capture that is very, very difficult. The argument in the Thiel case and in some of the other ones is that a person set out to do something, to expose something, to portray someone in a certain way without any regard to what the quote unquote truth is.
Right. The net effects of that are kind of interesting. Did Thiel paint a target on his back because of that? Or did he scare away the threats, the potential threats of other journalists trying to mess with him? That's an interesting question. Me, I tend to say that he painted a target on his back. But I think Thiel is somewhat autistic a little bit. I'm that myself. I think he's like absorbed, and maybe he was thinking he was just playing a game of chess, a very good game of chess. And he like checkmate very spectacularly his opponent. That is for sure, but that's not the objective. Just like folks on my podcast, right? Sometimes they're not a good fit for this pod, and I'm trying to find a way to tell them nicely. I don't want for them to be mad at me, but yeah, I'm trying to find win-win solutions always. To Elon Musk, Walter Isaacson has created a new book on him. That one will be very, very, very good. So much better than the Ashley Vance, I predict. And talking about hit piece, because back in the days, there wasn't any available information on Tesla. So I had to dig it in like books that were hit piece, like Ludicrous, the unvarnished story of Tesla Motors. And that one was a hit piece. It was actually written by a guy that has ties with Tesla shorters, basically. So yeah, the ethics there is always interesting. I want to ask you though, talking about ethics. So I went to Vegas a year and a half ago, and yeah, I was quite surprised, right? As soon as I went out of the airport, I saw all of these injury lawyers panels, and was like, okay, this is weird. There's like 20 of them. Vegas wasn't necessarily my thing. I'm a capitalist. I love some entertainment as well, but I'm asking you, like, you're there and you've been part of the community for quite a while. How is it to live in the land of capitalism and entertainment?
Well, when I first interviewed at the Las Vegas Review-Journal in 1984, all of the cliches were prevalent, and I didn't know much about Vegas. I had just gotten out of journalism school. There was an entry-level job. I decided to check it out, and the first thing the city editor did was take me around to show me the other Vegas, not just the Strip, not just Glitter Gulch, and because the cliche was, which hotel do you live in, right? Back then, it's not quite as true anymore, and Vegas has gone through a lot of different iterations, but where I'm sitting now is quite far from the Strip. It could be a suburban community of any city in America. On the other hand, if I go down to the 7-Eleven, I might find slot machines in a 7-Eleven, but I'm almost a nerd to it after all this time, right? And I wrote columns when I was a columnist saying we shouldn't let gaming spread into neighborhoods. Keep it down there. It's fine. Believe me, I'm not against gambling. I play some poker. My wife is a professional poker player. So I have nothing against it. It's just, I just think for a community to grow and mature, you needed to restrict it. And I don't think we've done the greatest job of that.
Deep. And I think I could find my home in Vegas. I mean, Celine Dion found it. It looked like a pretty cozy home. Frank Sinatra did. So there's many facets to one city. So I surely can agree with that. Want to ask you, because I remember before going Vegas of reading the very brutal story of the Vegas shooting that really marked me. It was such a sordid event and claimed the lives of many. It was really, really tragic. You covered many of those events over the years. What were the most surprising events or stories that you cover on your time there?
Well, I guess the most surprising thing is that they never really figured out why this guy did it. You know, what was
Right.
his motivation? There's all kinds of speculation, but that's all it is. There's no evidence for any of it. So a guy goes up there and opens fire on a crowded concert, and they can't get his motivation. Beyond the conspiracy theories, I think that's the most shocking thing about that shooting. Now, the shooting to some extent had an effect on this community that I had never seen, which was kind of a bringing together all the disparate elements of this community. A lot of people, and I probably said this early when I was thinking of not staying in Las Vegas for very long, it doesn't have a soul, right? It's like a casino. It doesn't have a soul. But I think that showed more than almost any singular event that this city does have a soul, that people really came together as a community, and that there is a community in Las Vegas. But it is a confounding mystery of why Paddock did what he did.
I somewhat studied that story deeply, you know, this macabre fascination with these events, but also the total sadness and depth that these events leave. And my very how could I say, innocent diagnostic was mental health, and maybe the guy just wanted to give a big fuck you to an industry that kind of left him on the serotonin loop in the gambling. You know, he was a big gambler. Also, when I went to Vegas, I didn't see much security. Maybe it was on purpose. Maybe it's because it's all CTV nowadays. And let's hope that it's that, because yeah, I mean, hotels are kind of ideal spots for that, especially when you can trap people. And the guy was so strategic about it. You know, it's really shocking. Do you often get fascinating by these things as well, or is it like my weird brain?
No, I don't think it's necessarily your weird brain. I think a lot of people are fascinated by them. I am not particularly fascinated by them. I find them to be chilling and just a comment on the state of society in many ways. And it's very worrisome that they never figured out why he did it. It's worrisome that these kinds of things, although not at this scale, are repeated pretty regularly in this country. And there is no easy solution to that, considering you have hundreds of millions of guns in circulation, and we're not going to go door to door and confiscate those guns, right? And so it's a very difficult problem. And so I wouldn't say I'm fascinated by it, but I'm definitely disturbed by it.
Yeah, fascinating is definitely not the word, but it's like it's trying to find out the why. You know, that's my obsession. I'm really pragmatic, realistic individual, and for example, my brain is like, how can we fix that? Well, CTV, if you have AI in there, I mean, but then it would become sort of a China state, you know, in which you can dig in the individual's past. Do I want that? Me as a Canadian going to Vegas to have some fun? Not really. It's a bit creepy, you know, if people like, let's say, would scan my face, right? It would dig out my Facebook. It would dig out all my social media. I mean, I'm a very public person, but then they can make potential conclusions, right? And if these conclusions are wrong, if it affects my experience in Vegas, and obviously, like I thought about Palmer Luckey and the drones, right? Drones can be a good solution for these types of things again, but then it would become a big brother state. How would you potentially fix that? And gun control, which is a huge issue in the US?
Well, I can't. If I can come up with the idea how to fix it, I'd probably run for president. But I don't know the answer to that, or at least governor, right? I don't know the answer. I think it's hopelessly complex. I think it's incredible that even things at the margins can't get approval from both sides, and it's become rote for Democrats to use it as an issue to beat Republicans over the head, and Republicans to go to it at the other extreme, and it's not just fealty to the NRA, although that has something to do with it, but not as much anymore. And it's what you said earlier. They always want to talk about this as a mental health problem, not a guns problem. Well, maybe it's both, and so it's just the two sides. This is the worst in the modern history of America. That two sides won't talk to each other. They will not. And social media has made that, while there are a lot of good things about social media, it's made that much worse.
Right. And there's so much pain in the topic, especially families that lost loved ones. So I guess that is amplified between both sides. And then we have companies like Apple, which are more on the privacy side of things. My question is, could we have a benevolent God watching us all the time and not creeping us out? Is that a mental construct of our brain that did not arrive in this era yet? That is like, oh, I don't want to watch all the time. But I mean, in my opinion, there's no such things as privacy. And if it's to save my life for a crazy person that will try to kill me, I'm willing to do that sacrifice. Now, the goal is not to penalize these people. Also, I think if we identify these people with mental issues, I think we would need to provide them help, right? The algorithm would identify them as a potential threat for society, and we would put more attention, more resources into these folks, because if we don't, they're going to take these resources back. I mean, it's a really simplistic way of seeing things, but I think it's a good start of a conversation. John, thank you for coming on today. Really insightful man you are. Thank you for coming on. Where can people find out more about you?
The Nevada Independent site is a good way to start, the nevadaindependent.com. You can see what I'm doing. There's a team page. You can email me. I'm happy to answer questions about almost anything, as I've shown today.
And I am Charles Cormier, your host, CEO, wisdompodcast.com. If you want to start, scale, be invited to pod, that is podbuyer.com.